Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I wanted to share our experiences. My son and I played this yesterday, the Tanks Modern Age. So I thought I'd take a moment to show you the table and give you some thoughts. It definitely is very, very similar to the World War II version if you've played that. If you haven't played it, then if you want to, it's a very easy, good starter game to get you into miniature gaming in general. But first I just wanted to share here, this is the final rolls that ended the game. Basically, I'll show the rolls here in a second, but basically what happened was my Abrams tank fired its anti-aircraft machine guns at the Hind, and I had rolled a crit, 2 hits, and then my son only got 1 success on his save. His Hind was already down 2 points of damage, so we did 2 more points. There would have been a crit, but that was enough to destroy his Hind and win the game. So what do we have left over? Smoke, I'll just move that for a moment here. We have T-72, but this was standing in as a T-64. T-72, not quite as good as a T-64, so I clearly don't understand the tank numbering with the Russians. Like T-72s were better than like the T-80s, and T-64s better than T-72s, and so it's not always a good judge just to say, yeah, we're going to bring the T-72s. The T-64 in this game is just a smidgen better than the T-72. It has an extra hit point, has advanced stabilizers. T-72 just has stabilizers. So my son was like, well, I'm just going to buy a bunch of T-64s. So we did. The base game only comes with 2 T-64s. So that's this one here, which is on fire, and this one here, which is on fire, and then our proxy T-72. This is the Abrams that comes in the game, so this odd green color, and then this one here is just one of the Abrams I had from my collection. From Flames of War, I have like 10 M1s and 10 T-72s, so we didn't really have to buy much. I already purchased the dual Hind pack and the Huey pack, so we had some air, and we didn't have to buy anything extra. I already had a bunch of vehicles and stuff. So we played a 100-point game. My son had 100 points, I had 99. So I have, probably the one drawback here is most of the time when you buy additional models for the game, since I already had a bunch of models, I didn't get an extra card per vehicle. So I'm just sharing 1 card for all the vehicles. That's fine. And then we use these alphabetical markers that come with the game, so I could label what tank with what. So D, this blown up tank was D, so I just put the upgrade cards here, kind of a thing. So I knew that one has those upgrades, keep track of the damage and stuff over here, and then this 1 data card for all of them. So it's possible to play the game with just 1 data card for your vehicles. And you have to, because even in the base game, it comes with 2 T-64s, but, and there's the but, there's only 1 data card for it. So yeah, you're going to use 1 data card for stuff. Kind of sucks. But again, if you buy the individual boosters, in more tanks, they'll come with their own cards. I just thought it was kind of weird that the base game wants me to use 2 T-64s, but only gave me 1 T-64 card. Anyway, then this is the other tank that was already well on its way to getting blown up, had 8 points of damage. Yeah, so this last tank that won the game was down, both of these vehicles were down to the last leg. So this was actually a very, very close game. Now with the helicopters, yeah, this is my dead helicopter. The helicopters, they really are a lot more powerful than I gave them credit for. They can take a pounding, except when they're shooting at each other. I tell you, they surprised me a lot more than I thought they would. The only thing that I didn't realize at the time is that the helicopters are going to be using a lot of missiles, and then of course any missile vehicles. None of that's included in the base game. And so they included the cards for the Cobra and for the Hind, I guess just to give you a flavor or an idea of things to come, or to use, some equipment you already have, which is awesome. But one of the things with the helicopters is they have rules for missiles. Well, at least the Hind does. The Hind has a Predator keyword. Well, I'll just show you. So his Predator keyword is that he doesn't suffer the movement penalties for shooting missiles. So here's a thing where if you have like a missile vehicle, you get these penalties for moving and shooting missiles. But the Hind, his Predator ability, says he doesn't suffer that. He doesn't have to, ignores the shooting on the move rule for missiles. Well, no missiles are listed here. So that's kind of weird. So I'm thinking you got to buy the Hind individually just to get the missile. Well, since I didn't buy the Hind individually, I already had it, I don't have any of the missile upgrades. And I'm assuming those are going to be upgrades because there is an upgrade that you can buy for the tanks, which is the MANPAD missiles, like Man-Portable Anti-Air Defense System, something like that. So I think there's going to be actual missile upgrades that don't come in the base set. That's fine. It's at a point where it's like, how many more vehicles do I want to purchase when I've already got British Chieftains, I have, Abrams and T-72s, now I got some T-64s, I already got helicopters. But if I want to experience the game fully, it's almost like tanks would be better if you just didn't own anything at all and just start from the base set and then buy individual vehicles. But on the other hand, I only have to buy one more vehicle type to get the cards I need. So it's hard to say if it's worth spending extra money on just to get a couple missile upgrades, because the gun system on the helicopters still have a potential to damage the tanks, believe it or not. My son, especially with the Hind and this Predator rule, and plus one of his commander, he had a bloodthirsty gunner. So if he gets in close range, he gets to roll an extra firepower die. So he was rolling 3 dice against the tanks, and generally speaking, that's actually pretty good. Because your average tank has 1 armor. So the way the game works, if you're not familiar, is this firepower number represents how many dice you roll to hit. And you hit on 4, 5s, and 6s. So, if I was attacking with my Hind at close range because of my bloodthirsty gunner, that right there would be 2 possible criticals, and then that was a miss. Well, my son has really good dice rolling skills. He's just lucky, and he was averaging 2 to 3 hits with his Hind. Now, the way defense works, the Abrams tank against the Hind, you automatically get 2 dice, and if you have no other defensive measures and your opponent hits at close range, well, then again, even at close range, you got to subtract one of those defensive dice. So your Abrams is rolling 1 defensive dice if it hasn't done anything else to defend itself. So yeah, those helicopters, even without missiles, can harass these tanks. The other thing too is the tank has 3 dice that it rolls for anti-aircraft machine guns. I'm sure we're going to see some vehicles come out that specifically can help deal with air threats. But look at this. Helicopters come with 3 defense, which makes sense because they're fast and they're up in the air. They're flying. Even if they're low altitude or if they're high altitude, they're hard to hit. So if I'm only rolling 3 dice to shoot at a helicopter, and if I've done any movement or the helicopter has movement, that just adds to the defense pool. So helicopters actually turned out to be pretty tough to kill. However, they have a rule called rapid fire. So, rapid fire 5. Basically, when shooting at another helicopter or models with 0 base armor, they roll 5 dice. So, Yeah, against other helicopters, yeah, not a problem. So the way we built our armies, points-wise, my son was able to take 3 T-64s and the Hind helicopter, and then I took 2 M1A1 Abrams and 1 Huey gunship here. And the problem is, I don't know, his Hind just killed my Cobra helicopter like right away. I feel like for me, and it could have just been, that's the way my dice roll, I probably would have been better off just taking 3 M1 Abrams, I think, almost. But he made really good use of the Hind. The helicopters in general are kind of cool because they can be high altitude. Now, if they're high altitude, they can fly over any terrain, no problem, fly over vehicles and whatnot. But if you put them at low, then they're kind of like a vehicle, and you have to, they can't, all terrain becomes impassable. So they give you a lot of mobility and flexibility. For those wondering then if helicopters have a impact on the game, my allergies have started kicking in. Yeah, helicopters can have an impact because they have such mobility. They can really get around the field, and you're always wondering where they're going to come up, and they are really hard to kill. But in comparison to tanks, the tanks are still, it's really hard to say. With the modern setting, the tanks seem kind of fragile. With like World War II setting, a lot of the rules made sense, and it's real hard to explain because, well, I guess it still works because the guns that you're shooting are designed, to kill tanks in one shot. With modern day warfare, that's a common thing you would expect. So I guess the lethality to defense is still there. So the tanks have to do things to make themselves hard to kill, like use a terrain, go inside of the forest a little bit so you get a cover bonus, or move. But I will say this though, for the game, they made one rules change that I thought was fantastic over the first game. In the game, your defense for the tank is decided by taking your armor value, and then you add in your movement and the opponent, the shooter's movement. So if you say your shooter moved 1 segment, you get an extra defense die for that. And then if the target also moved, say, 2, he's got a 3, he had the ability to move 3. But that would give you 3 defense dice. So speed and movement helps you out a lot. And then what's cool is on some of these tanks, because they're modern, they get stabilizers. So they get to re-roll up to 2 attack dice. So that means you can move a little bit and shoot and still have some accuracy, even though your target might be moving. So what that means is you could have, like, for this here, 2 dice that you start with. If I move 2 spots, that gives me 4 defense dice. And if my shooter moved up to 2, I can have a total of 6 defense dice. And that's great because you're rolling firepowers of 5. So you have, just through a combination of movement, a really good chance of avoiding hits, even though your opponent might have a stabilizer. But this is a problem that came into the first edition of the game, which is why I said this rule I'm going to share with you was a great addition. Usually what would happen is somebody could use 1 arrow movement to go forward and then 1 arrow movement to go back. So just like the video games, they're kind of like rocking back and forth. That doesn't seem very realistic. So what they added to this game is a rule where if a tank or helicopter is stationary, they can actually spend 1 or 2 movement points as defense. So I could, as this tank, say if I'm just staying right there, I could say, well, I'm going to give myself 1 movement point. And that represents, if it's a helicopter, in the rules it says that's a helicopter doing evasive maneuvers. The tank could be popping smoke, or if you go up to 2. So again, that affects your defense. Gives your opponent 2 defense dice to roll, but makes you harder to hit. So what my son and I did, and we thought this was cool, is if we ever just stayed stationary and wanted to use that, we just said, okay, boom, our tank pops smoke, and then we didn't have to put the 2 marker. We didn't think that was very visual to say, oh, I popped smoke and put the little 2. But we like that because now instead of having to say, well, 1 arrow forward, 1 arrow back, we just say, oh, stationary, pop smoke, I now have 2 defense. And why that works really thematically is because since these tanks have either stabilizers or advanced stabilizers, that gives you 2 dice to reroll on your attack. We just also thought of, well, that's thermal imaging. Some of these tanks can see through, dark, dust, smoke, and stuff like that. So even though that's still giving your opponent extra defense dice, because you have that stabilizers and quote unquote thermal imaging and things like that, you still have a chance to hit through your own smoke. So you're protected and can still shoot. Anyway, it just all kind of worked out. So overall, is the game worth getting? It really depends on what you're looking for. This is definitely beer and pretzels kind of game. I really didn't go over the rules a lot. Again, just kind of some thoughts after our first game here. I would say we're going to play it some more. My son liked it. It seems pretty balanced. Again, I brought 2 Abrams and a helicopter. He brought a helicopter and 3 tanks, and we still won. But it really came down to the last shot here. So it was very, very close. I had 1 hit point left. I took a beating. It took a while to take those 3 tanks out. And he got one of my tanks, and this one was almost dead. But it was a pretty close game. So I think it's pretty balanced. Again, your luck of the dice will affect things. So is it fun? It is fun. It's not a simulation. They've got some things in there that make it feel like a tank game like you would expect. Again, with like stabilizers, advanced stabilizers. Each tank could have its own special rules at some point regarding armor. The upgrades. Part of the fun is going through picking upgrades to modify your equipment. But it is definitely not a simulation kind of game. So it really depends on what you're looking for. We got this set up over a 3x4 table spot. The game says it usually works on 3x3, but I felt really cramped. These tanks are designed to get out and move. I know you can play stationary and sit in a spot and fire. That makes sense too. But one of the key things for the game is that idea of movement, and you always want to move. And tanks are mobile, so 3x3 just seemed a little constrained, but 3x4 seemed a little good. And that just adding that little extra foot, making like a 3x4, kind of helped us from just getting stuck like in the center of the map shooting, and then just throwing out some extra terrain. So you make a couple changes, mostly just that change, just make it like a 3x4 play area. It's good. It's good. I think it's a fun game. We'll play some more, but my son is already wanting to go back to play some Team Yankee, stuff like that. He wants to move like lots of tanks. So, but this is a pretty good skirmish experience. Anyway, just wanted to share that out. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or you want to share some of your thoughts yourself, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Bye.